Hey, it's John Foss. Very excited to be talking with Soledad OBrien about her new special, which is called Who Killed My Son? It's available right now on Discovery Plus. Tell us about the show.
Thanks. Yeah, the story is one of a murder. A young man, 19-year-old Praveen Varghese, goes to a house party in Carbondale, Illinois, and is never seen alive again.
Praveen was a great son and a great friend.
He'd really be the laugh of the party.
He was a good student, had a sense of humor, wanted to go in law enforcement.
It's every parent's worst nightmare.
And over the next couple of years, it's really his mother, whose name is Lovely, but she's kind of more like a pit bull, who has to figure out what actually happened, who killed her son, because both the police and investigators and the prosecution, they're all sort of reluctant to take on this case. And Lovely has, for example, when they finally find the body 5 days later, there are bruises on the face. Well, the police theory is that her son wandered out into the woods and got disoriented and died of exposure to the cold. And Lovely, who's a nurse, says, but look at his face. It looks like he was beaten. And police have a man who they're interviewing who talks about how he gave Praveen, Praveen was in his car and they fought, but they don't consider him a suspect. And so really it's only because of Lovely's efforts, along with Monica Zukas, a radio reporter she connects with, that they're able to force a better investigation, get access to the files, get an independent prosecutor, get an independent autopsy. And so it really is the story of a mother who does everything in her power to make sure that her son's killer is brought to justice.
You are the executive producer and the narrator. How did you get involved in this, and what drew you to the story?
Yeah, a couple of things. First, I think just chatting with Lovely, again, Lovely, and she's a lovely person, very quiet, but she's so aggressive. And I knew the story of a mother who just wouldn't give up would be a great story. We often call them, which I dislike, but characters, right? As a character, she'd be a good narrator of what happened because she's so strong and so unrelenting, and yet just a very lovely person. But also, the friends of the family had been videotaping what was happening from about 3 months after Praveen's body was found. And so we had so much access to material. We had a treasure trove of videotape taken over the years of every step of this investigation. So just as a producer, I knew it would be amazing to have access to that and we'd be able to tell the story even better.
One of the things that I found particularly disturbing was not only did Praveen die, but there was some character assassination going along with it by officials because it seemed like they kind of wanted to justify the decision that was made. What did you think about that? Yeah. And how did that, is that a normal thing? How did that take place?
Yeah, and as you were starting to ask that question, I'm like, I know where you're going with this. Yeah, it is not an abnormal thing, right? You can't imagine blaming the victim as if he's responsible for his own death is crazy. And yet that's what happened. And it's not that unusual. I think what Lovely would say, and has said in some ways, is that if her son, in fact, were the suspect, if a brown or black kid was suspected of killing a white kid, that there'd be much more attention and much more aggressiveness on the part of police, that instead, because the suspect was white, that they were very reluctant to take the case seriously, even going as far as saying, well, wasn't Praveen doing drugs? Wasn't Praveen drinking? And I think that was so upsetting to her and also Monica Zukas, who runs the radio show. But I think it spurred them both on more in this case. Like, I think it was upsetting, but it made them work harder because they couldn't believe that they were going to try to do a character assassination on Praveen. Like, who does that?
Exactly. Yes. Very disturbing. And I will say one thing that was very interesting about this specific documentary is, I guess it's a small world, but my brother-in-law was actually killed in the Jackson County jail by his roommate. He had a DWI, was in the jail, and was killed by his cellmate. And we've had similar frustrations that this family went through. And I guess my question is, towards the end of the documentary, there was a lot of focus on systematic racism and the fact that the reason these things happened to this family was because of their race. I guess my challenge to that point would be, for a family of ours that's white, who's had some of the same frustrations with the same group of people, shouldn't we be focused on the fact that a corrupt thing happened and maybe it's more of a systematic corruption within the jail as opposed to race? Or do you think was there specific racist things that you saw happen to the family, or is it just bad people not doing their job well?
Yeah, I think it's both, right? I think there is systematic racism and systemic racism in criminal justice. But I think we both know of many cases that we could tick off where things are just corrupt, right? That's crazy that your brother-in-law who's in for a DUI would have that befall him. Like, how horrific. And that case where the victim in this case is white and in a system that doesn't protect him, which it has to under the law, and that he's not the only white person. I mean, if you look at the numbers of people who've been exposed to or died from coronavirus, who are often incarcerated, whether they're white or black or Latino or whatever, and they can't get out or they can't get access to better health care, even though they're just awaiting their trial. They haven't been convicted of anything. And sometimes what we would all consider very low level offenses, even if they are guilty of them, should that be a death sentence, right? Like, no one would say that should be a death sentence for the person. So yeah, I think it's two things. I think it's overall corruption that exists and what we know that exists. And also a piece of that kind of under it, if you will, is there's also bias within that system as well. But that doesn't necessarily mean the system is fair to white people who are incarcerated, even if they're just incarcerated briefly. It's just a system. I think that's when people talk about reform, there are a lot of white people who talk about reform because they know the system is frequently unjust. And I think there's a sense of, if you know the right people, you might have a better opportunity to get more justice, if you will.
Where does this case go from here? Are you going to continue to follow it? And are there any updates that you can give us since you finished shooting?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's this crazy twist at the end, which is so disheartening and infuriating. And so I think the case goes forward, because with this twist, a killer is essentially let out of prison. And I won't give any more away than that. But I do think things have changed in the system that will allow for a revisiting of this case. And knowing Lovely as I do, and Monica Zukas as well, there's no question that they're going to keep going until justice is found for Praveen.
And you mentioned Lovely, the mom. She was awesome. It seems like their whole family was great people. How is the family now? Are you keeping in touch with them, and how are they doing?
Yeah, we do. We've been keeping in touch with them a lot, certainly over this last year. It's interesting for people who are grieving, right? Eventually I think the pain dulls, but it never goes away. You never forget that. And I think it's made her more focused on what she's trying to do. They are lovely people. They're great people. And I'm sure as in your family too, right? You go through a tragedy and you never forget, but you figure out how to get through the day and then get through the week and then get through the month, but you never forget.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Soledad OBrien, thank you so much. Everybody check this documentary out, Who Killed My Son? It's available right now on Discovery Plus. Thank you.
Thank you.